The Florida Gators offensive line needs to have a strong spring, or I'm going to lose my freaking mind. We're going to talk about it here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brandon Olsen, lifelong Florida Gators fan here. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. And the Florida Gators started spring ball yesterday. When Billy Napier did his post-practice press conference, he said some notable things, kind of talking about the offensive line that I wanted to talk about a lot, because this Florida Gators offensive line was horrid last year. It does need to improve dramatically from 2023 to 2024 in order for this team to survive, really. If we're just being completely honest, the offensive line needs to improve significantly. It's a position that you've invested a lot in on your coaching staff. It's a position that you've invested a lot in just terms of spots on your roster, in terms of the transfer portal, in terms of the recruiting class, with just sheer volume of guys that you've brought in going, hey, we can develop them. And I'm starting at center with this because Jake Slaughter will be your starting center. Okay. I know that there's, for some reason, some fans, they go, oh, it should be Rod Kearney. Like Rod Kearney should be your starting center. For whatever reason you may give, it's fine. You're wrong, but it's fine. Rod Kearney should not be your starting center. Jake Slaughter was one of the best centers in all of college football last year. All of college football. Like that's not me lying. Like, you look at any metric, any stat, any analytic, anything you want to look at. Jake Slaughter was one of the best centers in football last year. That allowed 9 pressures on the season. Okay? 9. That's Damian George allowed 29. Austin Barber allowed 16. Richie Leonard IV allowed 16. Micah Mazuka allowed 14. Jake Slaughter allowed 9. Okay. Pass blocking efficiency rating of 98.2 last year. He allowed 2 more pressures than Trevor Etienne, who was a pass blocker like 40 times on the year. He wasn't doing it often. And Jake Slaughter allowed 9 pressures in that time. That's great. Sure, he could stand to pack a bit more power in his punch. Sure. But to act like he's not been a damn good center, when you especially consider that he wasn't supposed to start last year. He wasn't supposed to play much last year. It was supposed to be Kingsley Eguakun, who was battling injury the entire season. Jake Slaughter is going to be your starting center. And I do think that it's very important to talk about how Billy Napier, during his press conference last night, made it a point to talk about Jake Slaughter's leadership, attitude, personality. Combine that with the film, and I don't care how you feel about Rod Kearney. I think he's great too. But combine Billy Napier talking up the intangibles of Jake Slaughter, combined with the film that he put out last year, combined with any analytic you want that he put out last year. That's your starting center. You have that solidified. And that's huge. Billy Napier also talked about Austin Barber taking on more of a leadership role this year. He's recovering from surgery. He's not cleared yet, but that his leadership is going to be a big part. And that's something that I do think this Florida Gators offensive line lacked last year. Last year, you had at left tackle Austin Barber, who was in his first year as a starter, a full-time starter. Left guard, Richie Leonard IV, in his first year as a full-time starter. Jake Slaughter, because Kingsley Eguakun was hurt, in his first year as a full-time starter. Right guard was Micah Mazuka in his first year in Gainesville. and then right tackle Damian George in his first year in Gainesville. Everybody there was either a first-year starter or a first-year starter in Gainesville. So I do think that leadership was something that lacked. Like Damian George wasn't starting at Alabama. Micah Mazuka is the only guy that returned that was a full-time starter the year prior. Okay. So I do think that leadership and established leadership is something that the offensive line really missed in 2023. That you have back in Austin Barber coming back, who he missed a few games at the end of the year, but played the huge majority of games. And again, he's reportedly taken that leadership role, which is huge, or a leadership role on this offensive line, which is huge, while he can't play. And last year, yes, you had Kingsley Eguakin in the room, and he was from everything I've heard about him, he's a very good leader intangibly, the brain's there, all that. And he could have did that. He could have been that. But it's really hard to do that in game situations when you're on the sideline. Like, yes, your leadership is valuable in the locker room. Your leadership is valuable on the sideline. Your leadership is valuable in getting Jake Slaughter up to speed. However, when we're talking about being on that field, in that situation, being in those trenches, Kingsley was unable to do that because of injury last year. And so his leadership is great off field, but on field, it was lacking because he wasn't there. He couldn't have been there. He was supposed to be the returning guy that is your multi-year starter at center, is returning at center before going to the NFL draft, and is going to be your guy. And he couldn't be there because of injury. That happened right before the season, too. So Jake Slaughter being a redshirt freshman last year doing that, yeah, it was tough to do. But this year he's returning. He's got that leadership. He's got that confidence because he knows. Like last year, it was, oh, will I be good at this long term? He knows. Last year, he's like, I was a dog. Obviously, I don't think Jake Slaughter says that. But I think that he should know. Like, last year you were a dog. You deserve it. And I think that leadership, like you want leadership mostly, or obviously you want leadership everywhere, but the most important positions to have leadership, center and tackle. Either tackle, but center and tackle. And so having that from Austin Barber at tackle and Jake Slaughter at center intangibly should be huge for your team. And so the offensive line that's returning, the offensive line starters that are returning to their spots, Florida's got not a leg up on the competition, but Florida's got a leg up from where they were last year. Where last year they constantly went through these shuffles and they constantly went through these cycles and they never really put it together as an offensive line. My ear's ringing from snapping in my own ear. But they never really put it together as an offensive line. And that was a clear, glaring issue throughout, whether you were talking about injuries sustained throughout the year, whatever it may be. They were clearly lacking leadership from inside the locker room, inside the players, inside those shoulder pads. They were lacking that leadership. And it's not to cast blame on anybody. Last year, the Florida Gators were young. Their offensive line was young. Their offensive line was new together. I think it's tough to go, oh, they can handle it. And sure, they practice together, but practicing isn't playing. And you can try to simulate in-game situations as much as you want. You can't do that in practice. That atmosphere is not capable of being simulated. Even when you play stadium noise, if that's something you want to do, it's still different from being there. And you could tell that as a fan. As a fan, you could just know, oh, loud noises are different from being in the stadium, feeling that atmosphere, feeling that blood pumping out of your heart. Like that's stuff that you can't replicate. You have to be there to do it. And so I think that this year having actual returning players, returning starters is huge for this offensive line. And then you also have the newbies who are coming back or coming to this offensive line, whether it's their first year starting or their first year starting in a certain position, which we'll talk about in just a second. But first, we are going to get a quick word from Amazon. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, which, by the way, Anthony Edwards last night was just ridiculous. He went to the locker room twice, came out and was just dogged, still dropped a 40 bomb, had the game stealing block. It was insane. But Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire Stick, like I have plugged into the back of my TV in my living room. just saying. Provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV, whether it's opening weekend for baseball, which is coming up, college basketball tournament, which is coming up even sooner. You're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV also recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, wink, wink, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On, all 200 something shows, and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports, whether you're talking March Madness, NBA, MLB, hell of a lot more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos too. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. You should just trust me on this too. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. Thanks, everybody. Locked On Gators, your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. And like I mentioned last segment, when we talk about the offensive line, you've got two returning starters that are returning to their positions. We'll talk about where I think people wind up. I will say this. I think Austin Barber is going to be at left tackle, whether or not you think he should be. Personally, I think he's better at right, but I think he's going to wind up at left tackle. So with Jake Slaughter established as your center, you should give Rod Kearney a go at guard. That's just what I'm saying. Because the way that I look at it is you've got Damian George is getting included in this segment, not the last one, because he started tackle last year. He's playing guard this year, definitively playing guard this year. So I'm including him in this newbies bit because he's playing guard for the first time. And I do mean playing guard for the first time. He's practiced at guard previously. He's planned to play guard previously. This is going to be his first time playing guard in game. So I don't want to hear he's a natural guard because that implies he's going to be naturally good at it. And that's not given at all. Okay? So I just want to get that one out there. And I'm going to keep saying that because people keep telling me he looked good at guard. You don't know if he looked good at guard because he's never played it in a game. So don't tell me he looked good at guard because you don't know what he was like at guard. However, he is playing guard this year. I expect that he will be a starter at guard this year. Okay? Najee Harris put out pretty damn strong film in his not even that limited playing time. But he didn't play a ton. But Najee Harris put out strong film last season. Okay? So when we look at guard, I think the thing that you have to do is have Rod Kearney, Damian George, and Najee Harris all out there competing for those two spots. Okay? There's two guard spots that can start, and you should have those three guys at least competing for that. Whether that's Najee and Kearney end up winning it, whether that's Damian George and Najee, whether that's Damian George and Kearney, whatever it may be. And I think you have to go into it with that mindset because, yes, Rod Kearney was switched from guard in high school to center with the Florida Gators. Najee Harris was switched from center in high school to guard with the Florida Gators. Okay? I think that having that kind of dual versatility from both of them is where you get to go in this position. Because, again, I'm expecting that Damian George gets one of the starting spots at guard. Whether you want to say wins, whatever. I'm expecting him to get that starting spot at one of the guard spots. Okay? That leaves one guard spot for Najee Harris and Rod Kearney. Two guys who have guard experience. Two guys who have center experience. We know that both of them can snap the ball. Therefore, you go, all right, yep, Rod Kearney was our backup center. That was the plan. But if they go at guard and he wins that spot, then Najee Harris, you're going to be the backup center now. In case anything were to happen to Jake Slaughter, we're covered. That's the approach I think you should take at guard. Have them duke it out there. Personally, I want Damian George at right guard because I do think Austin Barber plays left tackle, and I want them on the opposite side. for two reasons. One, I don't think either of them are particularly good pass blockers. And so probably shouldn't have them on the same side there because then they can't really help each other that well. And then you're going to have a weak side of your line. You don't want a weak side. Two, and what I do think will end up being a really fun thing to see, I want Damian George at right guard with Austin Barber at left tackle, or Damian George at left guard with Austin Barber at right tackle. Because when you run power and you have your guard pull across the formation, I want to see Austin Barber run blocking on that side, down blocking, power blocking, with Damian George coming through that gap, just coming right across. I want to see that because that sounds like a nightmare for defensive linemen and linebackers. That's a whole lot of power coming at you there. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see when Damian George pulls, because we saw he didn't pull a ton because he played tackle, and Florida doesn't pull their tackle much, except for really when they go counter and you come across there. They didn't run much dart. So when you see that counter, when you have the tackle pull and you have Damian George, he's a freaking killer. Like he's a dude when he's pulling. So yeah, I want to see Damian George on the opposite side of Austin Barber so that I see them pull, or so that I see Damian George pull to where Austin Barber is. Just pick up the pancakes. Just that's it. Like just knock teeth out of mouths. So that's what I want to see Damian George at right guard. When you talk about the other tackle spot, you have to look into the transfer portal for Florida. You have Cam Waits back, and that's fair. And I know that Billy Napier yesterday was like, "Oh, Cam Waits, he's improved the tackle. We know he could play guard. His ability to play tackle is picking up, so he can move around. Put him in the competition at guard. I don't care. I don't think he's going to be a starter. I don't think he's a starting caliber tackle based on the film last year. Again, I haven't seen what he's done this offseason, how he's improved this offseason. But I know based on the film that he put out last season, he is not a starter caliber tackle. Great size, not a starting caliber tackle. Brandon Crenshaw Dixon from San Diego State and Devin Manuel from Arkansas come in at those tackle spots as well to compete for those tackle spots. And again, this is another thing where I do think you should put Austin Barber in a competition. And if he loses, he loses. And it's nothing against him. It's just you got to figure out what you've got on your offensive line. And you brought in two guys, one with SEC experience and one with multi-year starter experience at the group of five level, but is damn good at it. And you go, all right, now we got you guys. We got Austin Barber, who was our guy back. Let's see what we got here. And you have those battles. I think that Brandon Crenshaw Dixon is going to win one of them. He's, like I said, pretty damn good. I think Devin Manuel this year doesn't play much or doesn't start. I don't want to say doesn't play much, but doesn't start as your full-time number one at the tackle spots. But I think that when you look at who you brought in, Damian George to guard can't be worse than he was at tackle, right? Najee Harris coming in on one of the guard spots. Damn good year last year. Damn good film. Brandon Crenshaw Dixon coming in. Damn good film at tackle. Analytics, everything tells you Brandon Crenshaw Dixon's a good tackle at the next level. And by next level, I mean from group of five to the SEC. And I think you've got that figured out. Now you just got to figure out who goes where and how we shape that. And we'll talk about that in a minute because I do think that we're at a unique spot right now compared to last year with this offensive line where we go, oh, yeah, offensive line was really bad last year. We need to see a lot of change for this year. We need to see a lot of improvement for this year if we want to have even a snowball's chance in hell at making a bowl game, whatever it may be. But I feel like we're at a weird spot in where I feel like we have a better feel than we did last year, if that makes sense. I'll tell you more about that. But first, we're going to get a quick word from LinkedIn. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is read by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. Yeah, right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team, school, whatever it may be, faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hell, you can go on there. You could look me up. I'm on LinkedIn. You could look up Chris Gordy. He's on LinkedIn, host of Locked On SEC, who, by the way, I'm on Locked On SEC today, Friday, March 8th. Just saying, if you want to do that. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. There are very few things where 86% isn't awesome. I'm just saying. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, you might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier for you, whether that's helping you write job descriptions, whatever it may be, making sure you get the quality candidates that you need. That's what LinkedIn Jobs does. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we talked about the returning guys, the returning starters. We talked about the new potential starters. Because again, you got a lot of guys where you're going to compete. But the important part about offensive line play, and I feel like we've had this conversation so frequently, and I stand by it. I've changed nothing about it, is that you have to find not just these are the best offensive linemen. You have to find the best unit that you have. Because if you have one guy who's your third or fourth best offensive lineman, but he doesn't mesh well with the guys or guy on either side of him, your offensive line's not going to play well. Like, and I talk about this all the time where you look at, I bring this up because obviously I'm a New York Giants fan. I cover the Giants for Giants Country SI. And you look at those Super Bowl offensive line, they didn't have really all pros. It was like Chris Snead was great, but they didn't have like consistent all pro offensive linemen. What they did have was an offensive line that knew how to communicate well and play well with each other. And that was huge for them. And that led to them winning those 2 Super Bowls. That's one of those things where we go, all right, like you don't need the all pros. You don't need the all American linemen. If your line can play together as a unit, you're going to have a really good offensive line. You're going to have a really successful offense. And so I think that that's what they're going to have to try to find out. And I feel like we're at a spot where, like, I think that we could pick eight spots probably that we realistically expect. Like left tackle, I'm expecting Austin Barber to start with Devin Manuel as the backup. Left guard, Najee Harris to start, then open. Like, I don't know who's going to do that. Center, Jake Slaughter, then Rod Kearney. Maybe you put Rod Kearney in one of the guard spots as a backup as well. It's like, all right, well, he's going to play whichever one he's needed at. Right guard, Damian George, and then open. Right tackle, Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, then Cam Waits. And I think that Florida's at a pretty unique spot, especially just from a Florida Gators fan perspective, where I can't remember the last time that it's been early March and we've been able to look at the offensive line, just look at that room and go, feel pretty good about projecting 8 of those spots, 5 starters, 3 backups. And we can go into this and say, hey, yeah, like we're expecting a competition. Bryce Lovett moved from tackle to guard from the 2023 class. He moved from tackle to guard. If he pops off, who knows? Maybe he's a starter. Maybe he's the backup. Who knows? But for the most part, I think a lot of us are looking at these 5 and going, and by 5, I mean the 5 spots, not necessarily the 5 players, but looking at those 5 spots and saying we have a pretty good idea for who's going to be a starter at all these spots or most of these spots. Pretty good idea for who's going to be the backup in most of these spots. And maybe you feel Devin Manuel's at right tackle, Cam Waits is at left tackle. Either way, you kind of know who's going to be your starting tackles, or you have a good general feel for who's going to be your starting tackles. And you have a good general feel for who's going to be your backup tackles. And I feel like last year, the only thing we really knew going into it was that at that center. Like, all we knew is Austin Barber was going to be a starter at one of the tackle spots. And then we knew Micah Mazuka coming in, if he was healthy, was going to be a starter at one of the guard spots. That's kind of it. We thought Damian George would be a starter at guard, and Keontae Goodwin started tackle, and then Keontae Goodwin left, and Damian George played tackle. And Richie Leonard had to play the guards, had to start at the guard spot there, and did a good job. I'm not going to change up just because he switched, just because he went to Florida State. Did a good job, right? But at center, we knew Kingsley Eguakin, Jake Slaughter as the backup. That was, I think, the only position where I feel comfortable saying we knew who was going to be the starter and who's going to be a backup. Everything else was like, yeah, there's going to be an open competition with these guys that came in from the portal and the high school class and all this stuff. Only thing we knew was center. That's it. Like, that's the only spot that we knew. And now we're looking at center, both tackle spots, going pretty good feel for who's going to start, pretty good feel for who's going to be the second string. That's a unique spot to be in as a football fan, not just Florida Gators, as a football fan. That's a unique spot to be in. And I feel like that's a pretty strong indicator for where this line is at. Maybe they don't play awesome. Maybe you just don't have the dudes. But I think looking at this offensive line, we go, all right, it's early March. We got a pretty good feel for who's going to start, pretty good feel for who's going to be the backup at the premium spots. Feel like there's no excuse to not work out there, right? You've got the 2 offensive line coaches. Feel how you feel about that one. But you've got them. You've got your offensive line in place. I don't think you're going to be doing too much shuffling and figuring out who's going to play where. Like, we kind of know what it's going to be. And I think that puts the Florida Gators at a very unique position and a very good spot where we talk about, oh, you got year 2 Graham Mertz here, and that's a huge advantage. You got year 3 Montrell Johnson here. That's a big advantage. You've got your offensive line pretty much shaped right now. That's huge for this team. And sure, I'm sure someone's going to underperform, someone's going to overperform, whatever it may be. Those usually balance each other out. But this is an offensive line that has legitimate potential to be a good offensive line, like a good offensive line nationally. The potential to do that. And I'm not one that's huge on potential working at, like, this is one where I could talk myself into it easily. And I don't think I talk myself into that stuff easily. But I could easily talk myself into Austin Barber, Najee Harris, Jake Slaughter, Damian George, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon starting, Devin Manuel, Rod Kearney, and Cam Waits backing up. Bryce Lovett probably at one of the guard spots backing up. Maybe Riley Simons makes a step up. Maybe it's Christian Williams, whoever maybe. I think it's pretty easy to talk myself into that, and that's rare. So I feel pretty good about where we're at on paper right now, but it's about actually putting it together and putting in the work and figuring that out. So for me, I think that Florida's at a good spot where you go, all right, spring should be huge for figuring out those little kinks that you got to work out, but you're primed for a big run. You're primed for a big offensive line jump in 2024. I'm really excited for that. I don't know why I've gotten really into offensive line play over the past couple of months, but you're looking at the potential for a massive leap for the Florida Gators offensive line. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33, and I will see you all next time.